Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I'm really excited to share with you my interview with Peter Gould, where we explored a range of topics, including his heart centered design principles, leadership, serving our community, and even his spiritual path. We also talk about his upcoming book and his course, The Heart Centered Design, which he gives actually live online twice per year. So I'm very excited because I'm registered for the next cohort. It's starting October 3rd, so I hope you'll be able to join me. You can find the information to register at theheartofdesign.com, theheartofdesign.com. Before we begin the interview, I'd really love for you to listen to Peter's very impressive biography. Peter Gould is a design leader and entrepreneur. He advocates for heart centered design to align spiritual aspirations with strategic design practice. For the last 20 years, his engagements have included Apple, Google, the UN, and a diverse creative portfolio for governments, startups, and global nonprofits. His contributions to design have resulted in international acclaim, including a major award from the UAE Vice President. In 2020, Peter was appointed as a UNHCR ambassador in recognition of his efforts supporting refugees. He is a recipient of the Stanford Certificate of Innovation and Entrepreneurship and has lectured design thinking at the University of Technology in Sydney. Peter's educational program, The Heart of Design, has helped hundreds of individuals and teams globally to align their spiritual aspirations with meaningful creative and professional paths. At the intersection of design, spirituality, and entrepreneurship, Peter aims to inspire a global heart centered design movement for a bright, shared future. I really do hope you enjoy my interview with Peter as much as I enjoyed chatting with him. All right, Brother Peter, thank you very much for agreeing to share your insights with us today on leadership and organizational development. And I'm sure that you have a lot of valuable perspectives to share for new and aspiring leaders. I asked you to be here today because, mashallah, like I've seen all the work that you've done, and you have something to say about these topics. So, inshallah, let's start with that. I want to start by reading a direct quote from your website, the Heart-Centered Design Canvas that you created, which I actually used recently for my own project.
Oh,
Mashallah,
that's
great
great.
tool. I
Alhamdulillah.
do want to use it for other clients, inshallah, but I want to take your class and I want to get a little bit more into it before I start using it, inshallah.
Great.
Okay, so the quote goes, so rather than thinking about the type of customers you want to sell to, tap into the heart-centered design principles and consider who are the people you want to serve. How will you do that with ihsan and ikhlas, which means excellence and integrity? It resonated with me because I find that many organizations that I work with kind of view people as customers and numbers. How many can we get in? As opposed to focusing on doing things with ihsan, and then people will be attracted to that anyways. Even if there's one or two people, it's important to do things with excellence, right? And stop thinking about it as a customer pool potentially. And it's in our religion to be in a service stance. So I just want you to, if you can, share a little bit about the heart-centered design principles, and how can organizations adopt that service-oriented mindset, inshallah.
Yeah, great. Bismillah. So, thanks for the beautiful introduction and question. So, I think where that came from. So, I'll give a little background and then kind of lead to the thinking that might have helped arrive at that kind of alignment. So in a lot of the design, um, I guess, education I received, and also a lot of the kind of entrepreneurial type of, teaching and guidance and insight that I found in early in my journey. So I've been running a design team for about 20 years now. Earlier in that process, it felt like a lot of the language and intentionality was really geared to how do we get people's attention, how do we just grow more users and get more users, and then how do we get more money from them, right? And how do we sort of find the sort of the default approach in a lot of the design kind of language, and it's particularly in any kind of commercial context, is really is pulling us towards that as a default. And I think in my kind of my spiritual journey and in the kind of teaching and kind of faith communities I was in and learning from and resonated with, that I feel like have this more timeless understanding that, well, a user is actually a person, and in that person there is a heart, and that heart has a state, and it's not just an emotional state of like, oh, we need to get more, dopamine to get them more excited to attract the user, but it was just thinking more holistically about our design responsibility and the kind of amana or trust that we have to serve that person and that community. So in the example of the heart-centered design canvas you showed, all that is it reframes some of the language and invites us to elevate our questions a little further. So rather than like, how do we acquire more users? That's such a mechanical sort of default that we use. It's simply inviting us to, as the designers or the founders or the people leading organizations, to maybe reframe the languages. How might we serve these communities? And for example, how might we help? First of all, acknowledging that heart, and those people have hearts and they have a state that they're in, which changes all the time, like ours. How might we help transform that in a positive way? So rather than just like, how do we just supply this service? It's just trying to encourage us to think a little deeper. And so all it's really doing in the tools that I've created and called, heart-centered design, or these heart-centered design principles, is just, it's actually a very old idea. It's just looking more directly at some of these timeless spiritual principles that, although I've kind of learned and understood from an Islamic perspective, they're also very universal. But thinking about, how we might serve, thinking of the skills and opportunities we have as an organization is an amana, like it's entrusted to us, and how we can serve people with that. It just changes the mindset. And I've seen that, alhamdulillah, over lots of examples, just by changing the language, shaping the questions to be a little more heart centric and thinking more about this way, it might lead to better design outcomes.
Okay, inshallah. Okay. And Ihsan is one of your one of the design principles, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So so especially for Ihsan, what are some strategies you found most effective in nurturing that culture of Ihsan within your organizations, the ones that you lead? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's, if someone is the reason why I've, in the language that I use and the kind of the tools that I've tried to facilitate for people, I specifically use these Arabic terms like ihsan or ikhlas, or trying to think about how we might cultivate barakah, blessings and goodness, because if you just put the word excellence, for example, in English kind of context, at least in my kind of experience, it feels so overused and so common and so kind of tired that it's just almost like a default. It's like, yeah, of course you're going to say do things with excellence.
Mm,
But and that's fine. It's just because, someone could just make a template on Canva that says, yeah, that's, our values are excellence. But what does that really mean? And I think when you bring intentionality into the language, the nomenclature, and you intentionally think about some of these, spiritually grounded terms like ihsan, it helps you really think more directly. Because sometimes, at least in my own journey, I kind of thought I would hear the word ahsan, like, deep excellence and commitment to craft, and commitment to, quality craftsmanship, for example. I would think of those more like they kind of live in a shelf, or they kind of belong in a more religious context. But ahsan is really our approach and our mindset, and doing things the best we can, and striving for that improvement. And I think in an organizational context, there's lots of ways to do that. But I think I've found that it's helpful to align people and the team and the culture, particularly the leadership from an early stage, is thinking actively about these terms in practical tools and ways, so that they're not sort of this they're not just implied and they kind of sit on a shelf or in a nice poster or something, but how do we actually bake that into the business model, or our canvas for our strategy? How do we directly put these words and this intentionality directly into the map for what we're building? And
mm,
that's things like the heart-centered design canvas.
mashallah. I like the term bake into, really fold into. And I'm assuming you're also like connecting it, you're using these words that are grounded in Islamic knowledge and spirituality, you're always connecting to the bigger picture, right? That we're there to serve Allah, right? Yes, we are there to serve people in the sake for the sake of Allah, right? So I'm
Yes.
assuming that that was part of the intention behind it, or
Yeah, it's so for example, another tool that I've helped just develop is taking something as popular and conventional as a what we might call a value proposition design. So it's sort of a very common tool or simple way to help get an understanding of what you're building, who it's for, why it's unique, what value it creates, that kind of sentence. But what I did is just simply add at the very end is why why are we doing that, and that so I just take something like the value proposition statement that we use in a lot of projects, and you'll find in all kinds of from corporate and enterprise to nonprofits and startups. They'll have to do these value prop exercise. What's unique about us? But what I found missing, just even from the tool itself, is the question why. And that comes back to your point. It's like, well, I think we really have to focus on our intentionality as part of the process in design, and try to get to a very deep level. And if it's founders, for example, there might be Muslim founders where that is that intentionality and that striving for ihsan and striving for that long term understanding of success, that more holistic understanding of success. It starts with making sure we're clear on why we're doing that. And for Muslims or people on the spiritual path, I think there is that very long term sort of understanding. It's like, well, that's part of why I'm here, is to serve. And the tools, gifts, and talents I have, whether that's a good education or good coffee, good Wi-Fi, whatever it is like, what am I doing with those to help serve people? And ultimately, it's because we want to remind people of bring people back to God, and remind people and remind ourselves to do that in service and that long-term understanding.
mashallah, mashallah, thank you. Um, I actually watched a video recently that One Path did. I'm assuming Jawad told me that it was an organization in Australia as well. Mashallah, great video about your life. And in it you say, I want to be a professional who is Muslim, not a professional Muslim. And my husband and I were debating about what you meant by that, but I thought about asking you if you can elaborate on what it means and how this thing I found it very profound and how potentially it influences your approach to leadership and to work. Maybe I read
Yeah,
too much
alhamdulillah.
into it. I don't know, but I think it's
No, well, I think it comes from a place that, especially someone who embraced Islam, there's a certain novelty that people find, especially as a white guy who embraces Islam, that's not always, especially where I live, it's not so common. And I saw that there's a novelty and niche interest that people sort of, lots of people find that fascinating, right? For all kinds of reasons, and not necessarily a good thing, for depending on who they are. But there was definitely, I felt like there were opportunities and times, and that definitely there's many times where I could have just been known rather than for the work and what the work does, but for being Muslim. Like it's like, oh, here's this famous Muslim guy, or here's this Muslim, and so he's there because he's Muslim. And I didn't want that. It's sort of, I know it's probably not the right parallel, but you know I look at some of, like, in pop culture, and why is someone famous? Well, I'm not sure, but they're famous because they're famous, right? Like they became this celebrity or whatever. And it's probably the wrong analogy, but what I just want to make sure ultimately is that it's about the work and the inshallah, the beauty and the change that you can help affect through the work, through the project, through design, and through the products and brands we're building and supporting. And is that being uh those being done with effect, and done those to do those professionally. And my faith inspires those things, and my faith is really, sort of ultimately the reason behind them. But it's not but I want to make sure that the focus was on the effect and the work, not me as the individual.
I mean, it came um, mashallah, I think you became famous because of the work you're putting out. Like I asked my daughter if she can lend me her Salam Sisters, but it's a very old doll, and she like wrote on it. She was really young when she was
Inshallah.
when it came out, and she was like, "No, I'm too embarrassed. He's gonna ask where the hijab is and where the others." I said, "It's okay,
No.
fine." But it's all the way back, like from the beginning. I think you've had this like putting out work that is, mashallah, like almost perfect, right? Like we strive for perfection. Allah loves perfection, right? But we strive for it. So I'm wondering if how much of you've talked about it a lot, but your spiritual path, like how this affected the way you're growing as you're putting out work, as you're talking about, Islam and heart-centered design principles at Apple, etc. Like how is that helpful to you to learn your deen, to be on the spiritual path? I'm assuming you're connected to teachers. Please share a little bit about that part of yourself if you can.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So I think it's been early on. Early on when I first embraced Islam, which is around 2002, 2003, I really struggled professionally because it felt like there were two distinct tracks of knowledge and kind of experience in my life where it was a design and creative profession. At that time, I was had my studio just running in its early days and doing freelance and just one or two, team members, for example, and almost had this sometimes feel like a dual identity at the start because I was quite hidden about my faith and I was a little shy to share that unless it was really kind of relevant. Um, and but the more I kind of basically went down this path of spending time in communities and meeting different kind of teachers, like I did live in the Bay Area for a little while, for example, and got to know a little later people like Assam McKinnon, like Hamu, and different kind of teachers that connected to where I really felt a deep understanding of our faith and traditional spiritual path, connected authentically back through their teachers in Yemen or Syria or sort of centuries of knowledge that it's very clear you can see these are grounded and not just someone's sort of opinions, tying all the way back to our authentic sources. And at the same time, I was doing design programs and I was helping lead more creative projects and I had this sort of, I guess, slow, I guess, directional change from all the, mainstream commercial work I was doing for, different kind of brands and different kind of freelancing for, mainstream companies, government organizations in Australia, things like that. And your heart gravitates. So I was really then sort of thinking, how can I feel more in alignment? And at times I had to admit I had turning down work and turning down projects a number of times, which was challenging at the time. But ultimately, I never really thought that, business and, commercial and financial sustainability just should be defined as success. Like it's just, the spiritual path in our faith. It's, that's one means it's important to sustain a family and make sure you provide and make sure you have means, inshallah, to help others too if you're blessed with that. But reimagining success in a much more holistic way. Is your heart in a state of sakina? When you work, do you feel like you're best using the talents? Are you designing soda and sneakers for your life and just advertising, getting people's attention and creating ways to, people to addict them to digital products and dopamine hits? Or are you trying to do something more meaningful with their time and encourage them and inspire them? And so I guess over time, I just wanted to really practice more of the teachings that I was exposed to and had access to. And alhamdulillah, I have access to some beautiful teachers now that and their communities and but I try to draw from all kinds of sources and Islamic sources and also still the mainstream design kind of and entrepreneurial thinking as well. And ultimately, it's just you kind of you have this inner sense of are you in alignment or not. If you wake up too many days in a row and you're like, feeling out of alignment, I don't want to do this work, or I'm just not feeling it's the right thing for me. Inshallah, we have the opportunity to keep reiterating ourselves and prototyping our work and how we think about our life and that's where the ideas for, I think, heart-centered design came about. And I intentionally didn't call it like, Islamic design or, Muslim-centered design. I intentionally use the heart-centered design kind of language because it's more universal, and it has enabled me to get, invitations to places like, Apple or Google or others where they're more open to hearing about these ideas, and they might be hearing the word barakah for the first time, for example, in that sort of design context. And I think there's opportunities to shift some of the design output in the world to something more positive, inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah. There's so many out there, right, to learn. I believe as a leader, you like for leaders, they need to learn their deen. That's basic, right? 101 need to be somewhere connected to teachers. And then the
Yeah.
other part of it, so from what you're saying is that's what helped you move forward, right, on your work. But the other part of it, there's so many, right, IDEO and all these other certificates. What do you recommend for in terms of someone who wants to learn about the heart-centered design or about, getting training on something to use, tools to use for their organizations? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I think anything connected to UX, user experience design,
Okay.
that's a very broad term, and it's kind of probably the current generation of, I guess, professionals. We might use words like UX, user experience. Um, it's a very old idea, right? And it's sort of maybe every decade or two, there's a lot of conversation in design circles around the nature of design thinking, for example. Is it good? What is it? Whatever. I think, if we pull away the labels a little bit, it's really about being in service to people. But I would say that, I would encourage, particularly young people at the moment. I do get a lot of people reaching out. It's like, I'm not sure what to study, and maybe I'm not the best to give coaching there, but I would say that whatever you do, I would say it's very helpful to try and have some design tools in your toolbox. So you're kind of familiar with the idea of, researching, testing, prototyping, iterating, and you've actually done some projects, try don't have to make it too theoretical. Like it's not so much about the certificates. I think those things are important, but it's those practical examples, and they could be very grassroots. They could be some in your communities. Like, hey, I saw how, we were teaching Arabic in the Saturday school. All the kids were so bored, and they were doing a few games, but they weren't resonating. So I thought, okay, spending time with them, and then, I came up with a couple of these ideas, and this is how we then, got 10x more engagement or whatever. Because of so and so. Like it could be as simple as that. And people doing that all the time, every day, educators, all kinds of leaders, they don't even think of it in terms of design necessarily or UX, but we might, as professionals or aspiring professionals, if we have a bit more specific training around understanding user experience and what are some of the ways used by the biggest companies, organizations, it will just help us, I think, level up. So I would say that's a really good. There's lots of things. If you want to get more deep into it, you have programs from orgs like a General Assembly, for example. General Assembly, GA, they do very deep courses in UX, practice in terms of digital prototyping and lots of things connected to that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think there's lots of options. But yeah, in addition to that, it's just also staying connected to your spiritual tradition and making sure that is actively inspiring and informing your decisions in the design and commercial and entrepreneurial path. Then I think inshallah you can't go wrong there because it'll always be principled and with the right intention, whatever it is you're trying to work on, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah, inshallah. All right. Maybe one last word about your upcoming book before we end, which
Yeah,
I'm
so just
patiently waiting
yeah.
for, inshallah.
Yes, I know. Alhamdulillah. I've plenty of people patiently waiting for it. Thank you for your patience. Alhamdulillah. I'm really excited about it. I'm basically, I think through probably the third full edit of the whole thing now. And I'm really happy the way it's taking shape, alhamdulillah. And I'm really grateful there was a lot of support for it and interest. And I don't credit that to me at all. I think it's just capturing the zeitgeist, if you like, of many people around the world, really looking for more meaning in their work, their professional path, and trying to seek alignment, and also not just consider for example, I was just recently at Muslim Tech Fest in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty, there's 1,000 people sold out. I think there was 400 people on the waiting list.
MashaAllah.
And there's, yeah, alhamdulillah, and it gives an example as there's people really, kind of looking for, better options and default path of like, hey, this working for this company is success, or getting this title, this kind of company is, success. I actually think there's a significant growing kind of movement understanding. It's like, well, Muslims specifically, but I think more broadly others, is how are we spending our time? Which companies are we serving? How are they spending the profits? Where is our time and effort really, impacting in the world through these global corporations?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, if we can level up ourselves in our design education, our mindset, our kind of entrepreneurial thinking, I think we can create the change we would like to see, inshallah, the products, the brands, the organizations, the culture, the movement around, I've kind of tried to package those into this heart-centered design kind of concept. And yeah, inshallah, when the book is finally done and finished and out, can't wait to sort of hear how people will resonate with it. And these kind of resources, definitely you can find a little bit at theheartofdesign.com. And I'll have the next cohort running, inshallah, in September, I think, for the Heart of Design.
For the class, which you give live, is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, that's right. So that's a live class I try and run twice a year. And that's a 5-week program. It's online, and we have people tune in from all over the world. I think we've had about 500 people come through in the last few years. And yeah, basically I run it live, or if you can't make the live class, people just, follow in. But we have a live group of, the learners together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really great. Alhamdulillah. A big part of it is the companionship, the sohbah, the community of, I call, like-hearted, dreamers and creatives and professionals, or even students aspiring to kind of, design their next step. They all kind of come together in this program, and it's usually really great experience. Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. Inshallah, I'll try to join you this time, inshallah. Inshallah.
We'd love that. We'd love to have you.
Jazakallah khairan. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for your generosity in your time, mashallah, with everything that you have to do. Jazakallah khairan. Jazakallah
Wa
khairan.
Thank you so much. Really nice to chat with
Yeah.
you.
It
Alhamdulillah.
was nice to see
Tabarakallah.
you. Jazakallah khairan.